Hello.
Okay, what's your name?
My name is Holly Vining, and I am a mission intern with the UMVIM.
So tell us a little bit about who you are and where you've been.
I'm 23 years old, and I have been serving as a mission intern with the General Board of Global Ministries for a year, almost 2 years now. And I was in Mongolia, in the capital of Mongolia, and right now I am in the middle. I will be going to Washington, D.C.
Okay. And what were you doing while you were in Mongolia?
In Mongolia, I served at a mission center and a church. At the mission center during the week, I taught English, I taught cooking class, I did pretty much everything there was to do just around the center, whether that meant actually teaching Mongolian to the kids, which I was not a very good teacher of that, but I ended up doing that a lot. And just whatever needed to be done. Take out the trash, mop the floor, just hang out with the people there during the week. And then on the weekend, I helped planning and with everything that involved the church. So youth and young adults, teaching Sunday school, praying at the worship service, everything involving the church. So I was around all the time.
Was the center at the church?
Mm-hmm. They're in the same building.
Okay. And so what was your favorite part?
I have a lot of favorite parts, yeah. One of my favorite things that I ended up doing when I was there, there's 3 main churches in the city, and there's youth in every church, and for a long time they've been wanting to go to camp all together, and they don't usually get to do stuff together as the 3 churches. But they've been wanting to go for a long time, just out somewhere and just hang out with each other for a few days and just like basically like a retreat. So my roommate and I, who I lived with in Mongolia, who worked at one of the other churches, we decided to get these leaders from the different churches together and plan a camp for the youth. And so it was absolutely crazy difficult with language barriers and figuring out how to buy food for 60-plus youth in the countryside and how to get there on a train. But it was one of the most exciting things that I did there and one of the most beneficial things. And there are things still today, the students that went on that trip still tell me it was like a life-changing thing, that they started coming back to our church or just enjoyed the trip so much that they wanted to be involved more in our church. So it was one of the most fun things that I did, as well as what I think the most beneficial and effective things that I did too. What's funny about Mongolia is they don't really have bathing suits because it's very short summer, and so when they all wanted to go and play in the river, I thought they were just going to swim in their clothes, but then we got down there and they just all stripped to their underwear. So I'm standing there like mortified that all of my kids are in their underwear, but it was totally normal to them. Okay. It was really fun.
Is that like
the biggest thing I think that is one of the hardest things in Mongolia was definitely the language barrier. When I got there, we took 2 weeks of language classes, and then we were done. It was a the name of the course was the survival course, and it was literally like survival. You could say numbers and how to get from point A to point B. But it was really a struggle, and actually the camp that I had with the youth from our churches was one of the first times that I really had been so immersed in the culture that I had no choice but to use the language. A lot of my students knew a little bit of English, but when you're like the only American person even close to around, you just have to learn. And so it was a struggle just to figure out daily life, how to take public transportation, how to buy groceries. So yeah, that's one of the biggest things there is to overcome in Mongolia.
That's great.
The church in Mongolia is actually very young. Christianity has not been in Mongolia for a long time, and the United Methodist Church, specifically in Mongolia, has only been around for about 8 years. So my church that I served at was actually 6 years old. So everyone that goes there is what I consider like a baby Christian. They're like 6 years old in their faith, and some of them have been Christians for longer, but for the most part, they're 6 or younger. And so there's a huge, huge need for discipleship, and so that means like kind of dealing with whatever they understand, what they don't understand about their faith, and and just kind of being present to them in whatever stage they're in, and that requires a lot of language to try to meet them where they are, but also just being around and being a positive influence, because they haven't had a lot of that, and so there's a huge need for people just to come and I think it was one of the first times that my kids had ever, I say my kids, but the youth at my church had ever had anyone who consistently cared about them in their life. So there's a huge need for people to show support in that way, discipleship, leadership training, tons of stuff like that's just basic stuff. Yeah, building church stuff. It's community church building stuff that they really need.
That's awesome. What would volunteers do? What would volunteers get to do?
There's basic stuff that needs in Mongolia, like church building, like the actual building, and like sustaining a relationship with churches. I think it's so beautiful when I see churches from places join with churches in other places, and your sister churches. You're not us or them, but your sisters and your brothers, and so I love to see relationships like that. There's a huge need for people just to continuously, not just one trip, one time a year, but for people to continuously send packages or materials for VBS. The people in Mongolia can do it. They want to do it. They just a lot of times don't have resources. And so relationships like that for the future are really key for Mongolia to continue to grow. And like I said, buildings, there's not a lot of church buildings. The church that I worked at is praying a lot about, and there's people who are stepping up in leadership who want to go back to where, in the countryside where they came from, and start churches, because there are tons of places in the countryside that have never even heard who Jesus is. And so there's a huge place for just discipleship in those areas too, and so that takes a lot of resources financially and manpower, encouragement.
And even you were talking about the heat.
Yeah, there's a huge, I don't know, a lot of people don't know that Mongolia, actually, the capital of Mongolia is the coldest capital city in the world. And so, literally, temperatures go to negative 38 in the winter, and so if the church is not heated, then you can't go. There's just, you stay at home. It's too cold to go out of your house to a church that's cold, and so there's a huge variation of funds that we have for heating buildings, and so a lot of times they'll go without heat during the week so that on the weekends they can have heat. So that limits things at the center during the week because they're in the same place. So,
tell you a little bit about what you're doing now after coming back. Like, how is your heart for Mongolia?
Yes. I think I learned in Mongolia the beauty of really being loyal and committed to a place and a people. After I was present with them for a while, I realized that it wasn't common for them to have that in their life. And so, although there are many places and people that I care about around the world, I think Mongolia is special for me because a lot of the people there, when I was leaving, said things to me like, we know that God is going to bless you and bring you back here because you learned the language, you learned like what it means to be Mongolian, and when people said things to me like, you're becoming Mongolian, it was something that I didn't take lightly, and so those things are part of who I am now, and so wherever I go, I'm going to be a Mongolia advocate, but I'm especially excited because I was placed in Washington, D.C. to work in a church, but their actual largest population of Mongolian Americans is right outside of D.C. in Arlington, Virginia. So I have no idea what that's going to look like, how that relationship will unfold, but I really am in prayer about what it looks like to support Mongolians here and how that connects back to Mongolians in Mongolia. So my life is not finished with Mongolia. I just don't know in what capacity that will take place.